This is one of the flow that we see around using DinoAI, which is really doing this process of development, right? And building new models, updating models. Of course, we want to make sure that every time we make changes, we are also updating our documentation, something that is often left behind, right? So how many times I'm the first one probably then say, hey, I'm going to go and create a bunch of models. I'll go back to the documentation. I'll do it later. What happened is that ultimately we come back with 3, 4, 5 files into a Mars folder. None is documented. None of them have tests in place. Now, I think the era of opening one file at a time and clicking on generate dbt docs for it, I think that's past. I think we live in a different place now where things are a lot more autonomous. We're able to instruct a lot more what AI and what the agent should be doing for us. So you might have noticed before that when I clicked on the add button, I have actually a few more options here. I don't have only add files, but in Paradime, we provide you add active files, which will effectively open more of the files than I have open here, or open context based on the file I have selected in my IDE. What we also added now is the ability to add files of multiple steps within the directories that I have. So let's go and look at this for a second. I can go here and look at some of the folders I have in place. So I have a couple of models. I'm actually going to ask to very nicely remove this one here, there. And I have a folder basically with 3 models, right? None of them have documentation. Now, I don't want to really go here and say, hey, model number 1, generate documentation. Model number 2, generate documentation. Model number 3. I want to have one single prompt, one single command that goes and say, hey, I have a bunch of files in my Mars folder. Can you document this for me? And this is what we are able to do with the additional context that we have provided through agent. So I can just pass this, add here, click on directories, and now look for my Mars folder here. And I can now press the send message button. What we're able to do now is to basically instruct the agent to go and say, hey, please check for me which files are here first. And it's going to come back with, okay, I can see that there are a bunch of files. Let me go and read what these files are. Okay. And on the back of this, it's going to read first file, the second file, the third file, and really start thinking not only about generating documentation as a point in time thing that we do, but actually work alongside us in a real world scenario where actually I'm going to have more files. I'm going to have more files in one folder. I don't want to go and do them one by one. So on the back of this now, went through, read all the files, read all the context that I provided, and read through the information that was required so that the agent now is actually parsing those files, getting all the column details that we need so that we can structure the schema.yml with description that we want in there. Again, extremely powerful because really this is what we'll find ourselves to do multiple times. We're never going to go and create one model. We often going to be creating various different set of models, traversing our folder structure multiple times. And here we go now. We have a nicely structured YAML files with all the columns defined, with all the descriptions that we want here, and all the information we want in one single shot. So really not having any more to think about spending time on generating files individually or generating documentation individually for our models, but rather complete our work at the end of our pipeline and say, oh, I have now 4 new models. Let's go and just document all of them in one single shot. Make that documentation available for the end user as well. I have one last thing that I'm also very excited about is all the example we've seen here is about dbt creating YAML files for the schema, testing the previous session, creating documentation, updating sources. But dbt is actually a lot more than that. So we have configuration file, we have the dbt project.yaml, we have potentially macros, we have a lot more things that we have to deal with in our day-to-day, which again, I don't think they're fun things. I haven't heard anyone that say that it was fun to update dbt project.yaml configuration. It's just we have to do it. It's part of what we need to make sure that we get the best out of dbt as a framework. But fundamentally, that's really not what we want to spend your time on. Some people are aware that we can use the dbt project.yaml as a main configuration file where we can structure in which schema we want to write our table, what kind of tag should be grouped on. It's a simple thing to do to keep our dbt project consistent and in line, but it's also something that it doesn't come natural, really, particularly for users that are kind of like starting working with dbt. Now, what we can do with context is, let's suppose that, and I'm just going to open the folder here for a sec. Here, now I have, and I can probably get rid of this one. So I have a bunch of folders and subfolders in there. And I want to make sure that based on my model or folder structure, I want to make sure that we update our dbt project.yaml with relevant information around which tag we should implement for each of those folders and in which schema we want our table to be created or views to be created. Given this, I have one simple instruction that I can give the agent to, which is, can you update my dbt project.yaml to map all my models to my folder structure so that each SQL file in the respective folder will write to the respective schema and also make sure any add tags. The only thing I'm going to do now is to just add the dbt project.yaml, and let's see what the agent will come up with. So I'm asking the agent actually to give me an opinion about, hey, I know what I want, but I ask the DinoAI agent to come up with his own recommendation, right? So went and was able to read through the DDT project.yaml file. And at the same time, we are now also scanning the project, the repository, to get an understanding of how the folders are structured and what we have in there. And what we'll see now is in my new dbt project.yaml, we were able to set a generic configuration that if no schema is provided or materialization is provided, make sure that everything is materialized as a view. But then it nicely starts setting these things for me, which is, okay, the source tables or everything which sits in the source folder for me should have this tag or combination of tags and might be materialized as views. For everything which is in the staging folder, should go into a schema called staging. And also, we're going to have more based on the name of the tables or models we have there. It's going to go and add additional tags. Similar thing for intermediate. Then it's cleverly enough that marts is what we expect to be materialized as stable in most cases, because it's what get presented to the end user. So we want them as fast as possible to be able to get data out. So we also went around creating for the marts folder the materialization of stable for us with some additional tags related to the model specifically that were in that folder. Again, it's as simple of clicking accept to see all these updates coming through. And again, using AI, I don't even have to worry about writing a commit message, but actually we can use the write commit using AI feature of Paradime to provide a commit message that makes sense to any reviewer there.